The 2025 NFL playoffs are officially here. In this video, my complete preview of the AFC, the NFC, and each and every playoff team. How far will every team go? Which teams are dark horses? Which teams are frauds? And which teams are the real contenders? I'll give you my hot takes, my bold predictions for these playoffs, and ultimately answer the question that everyone wants answered. Who will win Super Bowl 59? If that sounds good, spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to OwnersBox Fantasy for more NFL playoff coverage just like this. Now, within each conference, I'm going to claim a team a dark horse, a contender, or a fraud. And within those teams, I will discuss why I believe these teams will go to the divisional round, the conference championship, maybe the Super Bowl, and I will let you know where I actually think they're going to be eliminated. Let's begin with the NFC. In the NFC, working our way from the 7 seed to the 1 seed, the Green Bay Packers are once again the NFC's 7 seed. And I feel like just because they're the 7 seed and what the Packers did last year in the playoffs, upsetting the Cowboys, demolishing Dallas, it gives reason for optimism and hope. And sure, Packers fans, you can believe. And honestly, I thought I would be a lot higher on the Packers entering the playoffs than I am. But the simple fact is that the Green Bay Packers are nothing but frauds. Yup, they're the first fraud of this video. And I understand they're the 7 seed, but this is a team that came into the season with high expectations. This was a team that faced a lot of good teams and pretty much beat 0. Who did they beat this year, right? Like, the Vikings swept them. The Lions swept them. They lost to the Eagles. They've lost to the good teams they have played for the most part. And I look at this team as just too inconsistent on both sides of the football. From the quarterback Jordan Love, who's a bit erratic in his decision-making and his accuracy. The receiving core struggled to separate from a man coverage-oriented defense like the Lions, or even what we saw from the Vikings in their recent game. Christian Watson getting hurt demolishes the explosive element of the offense. And then defensively, without Alexander, this secondary is very bleak, coupled by a pass rush that is kind of pathetic. So yes, the Packers can actually stop the run this year. And yes, the Packers have a good run game and a good coach in Matt LaFleur. Josh Jacobs has been a phenomenal story. But I really don't see how this team gets past the first round. I don't see it at all. So my bold prediction for the Packers is that they are closer to a fraud than a dark horse. They might get blown out in the first game. And honestly, I think the Denver Broncos are more of a threat as the 7 seed than the Green Bay Packers. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe I'm sick in the head. But I personally don't see it with the Packers this year at all from what I've seen recently. I think that they have talent, but they have not pieced it or put it together this year. My X factors for this team to possibly prove me wrong would be their cornerbacks, Valentine and Nixon. Because Alexander does not appear that he's going to be healthy anytime soon, that guy's an absolute Band-Aid. Valentine and Nixon are going to have to step up. Valentine's feisty. He's been proven to make some plays. Nixon is a great returner. He's quick. He's shifty. He can laterally move with good route runners, but they're both inconsistent. If they want to win in the playoffs, they're going to have to cover Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Neither of them are a physical matchup for A.J. Brown. That's going to be a problem, right? The Packers have been good against the run this year, so they should be able to slow down Saquon. Week 1, they couldn't, but if they can put their corners a little bit more on islands and trust them a little bit more, that could allow them to sell out and stop the run game of the Lions, stop the run game of the Eagles. These are the teams they're going to have to beat to go anywhere. And I just don't see how they beat either one, right? So I don't see them getting out of the first round. But if they do, it's because their corners play outrageous football. They step up and they allow this defense to thrive and complement an offense that definitely needs some complementing, especially without the explosive element of Christian Watson. So the 7 seed Packers, fraud. At the 6 seed, we've got the Washington Commanders, who I don't know whether or not they are necessarily a fraud or a dark horse, but I tend to lean towards dark horse a little bit because I think the winner of the Bucs and the Commanders is kind of up in the air. Like, I feel like either team could win this matchup, but honestly, do I see the Commanders going to Detroit and winning? I would be genuinely shocked. So I just kind of feel like the Commanders are what they are. They're not really a fraud, because I don't think anyone really thinks they're a legitimate threat to win the Super Bowl. They're not a contender by any means. But they're a young team that I think is going to be happy to be there. And often those are the type of teams that don't last very long in the playoffs. So personally, I think they're going to lose to Tampa Bay, but I could see them beating the Bucs in a shootout where Jaden Daniels takes over and Terry McLaurin has a massive game. The Bucs have shown that defensively they can let some big plays slip through their fingers. And with Lattimore there, locking down Mike Evans, Lattimore being my X factor for this team in the playoffs, that also could really help them tilt this matchup. Lattimore is the X factor for me because he's the guy that can go on the island and defend Mike Evans, and that will allow them to sell out to stop the run of Bucky Irving, and that will force Baker Mayfield to go to alternative options without Chris Godwin, which is a major factor in that first round matchup. Lattimore also could be the guy that maybe slows down Jameson Williams in the second round, or slows down, if the Packers somehow win, which they're not going to, slows down, Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, right? So Lattimore just changes the math of the Washington defense. And we haven't really seen many reps or many games where Lattimore has been active for the Commanders. So we don't really know what their defense will look like. But if their defense allows, with Lattimore outside, allows them to be a little bit more tough against the run, a little bit more pack in the box, a little bit more aggressive in the front seven, I think that could lead to a potential dark horse run from the Commanders, because we know what they can do offensively. We know that they can create explosion through their passing game. We know that they've got a great screen game. We know they can run the ball. We know they have balance. We know they have a dynamic talent at quarterback, but the question will remain on defense, especially with the run game. And I think that's dependent on how good is Lattimore on the outside to help that run defense maybe get away with being a little bit more aggressive. At the number 5 seed, the Minnesota Vikings, I think just like their counterpart in the NFC North, are a fraud. I think the Vikings are an absolute fraud. After what we saw from the Detroit Lions game, I can never forgive them, to be honest. I thought that they were going to win that game, and I thought they were going to go in there and at least be competitive, but I was completely wrong. And I think what I just overlooked completely is 2 factors. Sam Darnold puked on himself, and that's going to happen in the playoffs again. And number 2, the Vikings are not a good team on the road in a big game. I've seen them play against the Rams on the road already this year. They lost. And quite frankly, I think they're going to lose to the Rams again in the first round. That would be my prediction. I think their season ends in the first round. I think they're one and done. That's my bold prediction for this team. One and done. I like their defense. I think that Brian Flores is a heck of a coach, same as Kevin O'Connell. But Jefferson pouting last week did not do me any favors for this team's vibes. I think they have zero momentum. I think they're shocked. I think they're going to go in there and they are not going to be prepared to play with the Rams, a team that's experienced, that's won Super Bowls. Stafford is clutch. Sam Darnold is anything but. You'll be seeing ghosts. And sure, this team has shown this year that they are definitely feisty. They're definitely a team that has to be taken seriously because of their record, because that they were constantly winning games despite maybe not playing their best football at times. They were able to surprise a lot of teams, surprise a lot of NFL fans in general. And perhaps they could win a game or, maybe 2. But honestly, I think their ceiling is probably the divisional round, because I don't see them beating the Eagles with their dominance at the line of scrimmage. And I think Detroit has proven that they have the Vikings number at this point, and I would never pick them in that rematch in a third game. So I think the Vikings ceiling is just getting out of the first round. And that also plays a factor in their mind. The Vikings understanding that they probably won't beat the Lions. I feel like maybe in the back of their mind, they could compete with the Eagles because they haven't really played them this year. But I think that also plays a factor. Well, the Rams, they went to overtime with the Lions. They still believe that could happen. Stafford going to Detroit, they believe that could happen. So yeah, the Vikings, don't underestimate momentum. Don't underestimate you getting your absolute butt handed to you in the last week of the season and having to show up the week later and play football. I don't know if that's going to work out. The number 4 seed, before we get to the 3 seed, I'm really excited. At number 4, we've got the Los Angeles Rams. And for the Rams, I guess my bold prediction would be that they're going to win a game in the playoffs, because honestly, this team has a negative point differential. This team nobody thought would actually win their division. This team is not playing exactly dynamic or fun football lately. So the Rams just winning a game in general is going to be a bold prediction from my standpoint. I view their X factor as Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp is a guy that's been very quiet lately. He's not been putting up Cooper Kupp numbers, but we've seen this team go on a Super Bowl run before, and it was thanks to Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp. And every team that plays the Rams in these playoffs is going to understand that Puka Nacua is the go-to target. Puka Nacua is the guy that you need to cover, you need to double. And if Cooper Kupp can somehow, some way, turn back the clock and become Cooper Kupp from 2021 in the 2022 NFL playoffs, then all of a sudden you have a dynamic team that could be a dark horse, in my opinion. So the Rams do have a defense that's on the rise, a defense that is young, a defense that's hungry up front. They've got a very good pass rush. I think their scheme defensively is solid enough. I'm scared about the speed of their second level and their third level in their secondary against certain matchups in these playoffs, but I think they can compete in the front seven with just about anybody. Their run defense has slowly gotten a lot better, and with Stafford under center, Sean McVay coaching this team, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Kyron Williams, this team can put up points in a hurry, and this team can beat just about any team at their best when they're really flowing and clicking offensively. So that's why I think they're a dark horse as the 4 seed. The number 3 seed is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're also a dark horse in the NFC. My X factor for this team is Jalen McMillan. Why? Because I brought up Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans in the first round. If Evans is not at his best, somebody's going to have to step up in that department. And over the last 4 or 5 weeks, McMillan has caught 5 passes in every game and at least 1 touchdown in every game. So McMillan has proven, even as a rookie, that he can be a very productive player in this league, and he can burn teams when you kind of resort to putting too many resources to stopping Michael Evans. Baker Mayfield has been absolutely phenomenal. One of the best quarterbacks this year in football. One of the most clutch playmakers in football. Their O-line is very solid, and their run game is elite, in my opinion. Their defense has a lot of flaws in terms of giving up explosives in the pass game. I think health will be very key. Antoine Winfield, Jamel Dean, right? McCollum in the back end, and getting Kalijah Kancey unlocked up front is going to be a huge factor. I love this team's experience. I love this team's championship pedigree. They've got a guy like Shaq Barrett coming back in the fold. They have a guy like Mike Edwards, who was a late pickup on that Super Bowl team. They have guys like Vita Vea, Tristan Wirfs, Mike Evans, right? Guys that have won a Super Bowl. Levante David leading the way. Todd Bowles, I think, has a defense that can also give the Lions and the Eagles some problems, as we've seen already this year. They're the only team in the NFC that beat both the Lions and the Eagles, which is why my bold prediction for the Bucs is that they could sneakily go on an NFC championship type of run. I'm not sure that they would be able to beat both teams again, but I think they could have a shot at going to Philadelphia and winning. So I'm throwing that out there. I do think they'll beat the Commanders, although I've stated already that the Commanders are closer to a dark horse than a fraud. I think the Commanders could beat the Bucs, but if the Bucs manage to win that shootout type of game, they go to Philadelphia. They match up well with the Eagles on paper, given their ability to slow down the run game, given their proven success of slowing down mobile quarterbacks, and given Baker Mayfield being an absolute baller, I think that they could win that game. The number 2 seed is the Philadelphia Eagles, and they are an absolute contender. And my bold prediction, or my hot take about the Philadelphia Eagles, is that they are the best team in the NFC. They will win the NFC. So yes, I think the Bucs can go to the NFC Championship. There is an open door for that. And I could see the Bucs eliminating Philly for like the 3rd or 4th time in the playoffs over the last 3 or 4 years. But I think that the Eagles will be the best team in the NFC, because I think they're the most complete. They're also healthy. Jalen Hurts, as long as he's okay with the whole concussion deal, they can run the football on you. It's a pick your poison offense. They can spread it out with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith if you overcommit to Saquon in the backfield. They've got Dallas Goedert to also throw the ball to. Hurts has proven at times in the playoffs he can be a big game performer. Just think back to his Super Bowl performance. And defensively, they arguably have the best defense in football. Their pass defense is number 1. Their pass defense in yards, number 1. Their pass defense in net yards per attempt, number 1, right? Yards per drive, they're number 1. This Eagles team is legit in the secondary. And that's why I think their X factors are CJ Gardner-Johnson, a feisty playmaker in the playoffs, is crucial. Cooper DeJean, the rookie, is a hybrid nickel defender who could be crucial in defending Amon-Ra if they see him in the NFC Championship. And Quinyon Mitchell is a guy that would be a great matchup for Jameson Williams. He's going to be an interesting matchup against these Packer receivers on the perimeter. And then also in that second round, Mike Evans is going to be a big draw for him. So, the Eagles, I really believe in them because they're a complete team. And I don't think they're getting enough respect in comparison to the Lions, who are the number 1 seed. They are a contender. I do think it's the Lions or the Eagles in the NFC. I think one of these teams is going to represent the conference. But the Lions are the most bet team in the NFL to win the Super Bowl. And that's why my bold prediction and my hot take about the Lions is that they actually can't win the Super Bowl. I don't see it. I don't imagine it. And I know that this has kind of been their year, right? It almost feels like this is the exact same thing that happened with the Niners last year, where like everybody kind of knew they would be in the Super Bowl. But honestly, I think the Eagles are just a more complete, more talented overall team. And the Lions, they're beat up. And my concern is that guys like Carlton Davis are not coming back. Aiden Hutchinson probably won't come back to the Super Bowl. Their pass rush, their secondary, they're just really injured. And that's really going to hurt them against these teams in the playoffs, right? I don't think they're going to play as well as they did against the Vikings in every single playoff game because Sam Darnold is not the quarterback on every single one of these teams. And he's not going to puke on himself in every single one of these games, right? Dan Campbell, the home field, the fourth down conversions, those things could lead them to a lot of success. Their offense might be the best in football. I think it probably is down to down, play to play, game for game. Overall, it's probably the best. It's the most balanced. But again, if they face the Eagles in the NFC Championship, I think that's a really difficult matchup for a variety of reasons, including the Eagles' pick your poison offense and having the best defense in the league led by Vic Fangio, a guy that's had Jared Goff's number. And then in the Super Bowl, if they get there, they'd have to face a better quarterback, flat out. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not sure they'll be able to win that game. So I think that's my bold prediction, and those are my takes on the NFC, man. I feel like the Eagles are going to win it. I think the Bucs are a true dark horse. I think the Lions are a little bit overrated, but I certainly feel that the Packers are a fraud. Let's get to the AFC and examine that conference. On the AFC side of things, beginning with the Denver Broncos as the 7 seed. And remember, I think the Broncos are a more competitive, high ceiling 7 seed than the Green Bay Packers. And I feel that's pretty hot. But I do believe that the Broncos are a dark horse. You look at how they've been playing lately. You look at how Bo Nix is playing, how Sean Payton is calling plays, how this defense has played throughout the entire season, right? The Broncos have the number 1 defense in the NFL in EPA. Number 1. They're number 1 in pressure rate. They're number 1 in sacks. The Broncos defense is legit. And the way Bo Nix is moving the ball, the Broncos have a chance to beat any team in the AFC, maybe besides the Ravens, who absolutely dominated them. But that means they have a chance in Buffalo, which is why I label Denver a dark horse. They are the horse, right? And you look at them and you say, if their pass rush can get after it, they can really be that team that shocks the world. Zach Allen has been an all-pro interior defensive lineman. Nick Bonito has been one of the defensive players of the year, making interceptions, sacks, forced fumbles, pressures. He's an absolute baller, playmaker, extraordinaire. John Franklin Myers, good football player. Jonathan Cooper, good football player, right? Cooper's a beast. So DJ Jones, good football player. I like this front 7. I like this pass rush. If they can keep Allen in the pocket, play on the outside, physical coverage, it's going to be difficult for the Bills to find consistency. The run game of the Bills is good, but the Broncos' run defense is also good. So this team is just a 3-phase team. This team beat the Bills last year in their building. This team can compete with Buffalo. As good as I think Buffalo is, Denver could be a 7 seed that gets a upset. This is probably going to be a closer game than people think. So I like Denver. I think that they are a dark horse, and that's why I'm a little higher on them than I think most other people. Despite me never really being a Bo Nix guy, he's got me believing right now just because that offense is so in sync and the rhythm of it is just chef's kiss. The number 6 seed is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think you guys know this team's an absolute fraud. There's no doubt about it. The Pittsburgh Steelers have lost the last 4 games consecutively to enter the playoffs. They lost to the Bengals. They lost to the Eagles. They lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Chiefs. And pretty much in embarrassing fashion in every single game. I mean, the games weren't really that close. I know the Bengals game was close on the scoreboard, but it wasn't really that close in reality if you actually watched the game. The Steelers have been struggling to block people offensively, throw the football with Russell Wilson. Wilson's been erratic. He's taking too many sacks. He's all over the place. George Pickens looks like he's, had a couple too many brewskis when he's been on the football field. I don't know what he's doing. He was so sloppy in that Bengals game. He needs to be an X factor for them to have success. But in my opinion, their only chance is if Russell Wilson does somehow play like he did earlier in the year, where he's just hitting these moon balls, where he's scrambling, where he's converting third downs with scrambles, where he's buying time, where he's creating magic, where he's doing his thing. Like, Russ has got to turn into a clutch Seattle version of himself that has been kind of long gone. Mike Tomlin has to get over the hurdle of winning a playoff game for the first time since like 2016. It's been a long time. This team is just a tradition of entering the playoffs as a team that nobody thinks is any good, getting absolutely hammered, and then leaving and departing on a sour note. And then they just repeat the process each and every season. And I kind of feel like that's going to happen again against the Baltimore Ravens. I do think that they'll lose to the Ravens, right? But I could see the game being close because I think out of all the matchups, they know the Ravens the best. If Zay Flowers isn't playing, it kind of allows them to play their man coverage. Dante Jackson should be back, which will help out Joey Porter Jr., TJ Watt, that front seven, Cam Hayward. They know how to rush Lamar Jackson, and they can slow down Derrick Henry, and they know what it's like to play in Baltimore. And offensively, if they can just hit a few big plays against this secondary that's been a little leaky at times this year in Baltimore, then they have a chance for an upset. But I still feel they're a fraud. Like, they're not going beyond the divisional round. There's just absolutely no chance. They're not beating the Chiefs. It's the worst matchup in the NFL for them. They're going to get dissected and dismantled. So they might as well just lose to the Ravens and call it a day for the sake of NFL fans out there. And I think that's what will happen. The 5 seed in the AFC is the Los Angeles Chargers, who I think are the clear AFC dark horse. Out of all the teams, I think the Chargers are the biggest dark horse of them all. Why? I know that you have to get over the hurdle of the Chargers chargering and the Chargers choking, which is pretty frequent. But this Jim Harbaugh team feels a little bit different with Justin Herbert. They actually feel like a very feisty underdog. Why? Their defense has been good all year. They're first in points against in the NFL. Their pass rush, they've got 2 really good edge rushers in Bosa and Mack. Their secondary is young, but they don't give up big plays, and they make every yard count, right? Every yard. You have to take your time and be patient offensively to really break them down. And then on the other side, Herbert is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He is precise. He is accurate. He's got a big arm. I think he can play in all the elements. And the O-line is really steady. Their tackles are excellent. Their run game with Dobbins is much better. And it feels like Ladd McConkey has broken out as their number 1 target, which gives them a certain floor. Now, their X factor would be their secondary offensive weapons. Can they get big plays from Quentin Johnston? He played great against the Raiders in the final week of the season. Can they get the odd Josh Palmer down the field pass to connect? Can they get Will Dissly to be that chain mover underneath, right? These are all elements that could allow the Chargers to maybe even go to Kansas City and win. Remember, the Chargers barely lost to the Chiefs last time they played, and it was without Ladd McConkey. So my bold prediction for the Chargers is not only will they beat the Texans in Houston, but I think they have a chance, a real legitimate one, to beat the Chiefs in the divisional round. Now, I have picked the Chiefs, and I think their season will end against Kansas City in Arrowhead. But I'm just saying it's going to be a field goal game, and my bold prediction or hot take would be, don't be surprised if the Chargers are in the AFC Championship game, because they're peaking at the right time. Their defense is legit. Their coaching is legit, and their quarterback is awesome. So that's why they are made to be a good playoff team. The 4 seed is the Houston Texans. The Texans are absolutely a fraud, and I think you can make an argument. It's between them and the Steelers is the worst team in the entire playoffs. The Texans just can't block anybody, and that's why they are a fraud. Their offensive line is the X factor. If their O-line can somehow find a way for the first time all season to protect CJ Stroud, maybe they have a chance to beat the Chargers and maybe even go into Kansas City and make it a game. But ultimately, I think their ceiling is winning a game and losing, just like last year, where they beat the Browns kind of convincingly, actually extremely convincingly, and then they went to Baltimore and they got handled, and they were a big underdog. Now, CJ Stroud has been clutch throughout his career, his young career, But it feels like Stroud he's not the same player this year because he's not getting the same protection. He's not been provided the same time. He's more erratic. He's more confused than ever. And they don't have the plethora of targets on the outside to really threaten defenses. Schultz is too slow and unathletic. Nico Collins has to take on the entire world out there. And I don't know if Deontay Johnson is ready to really learn and run this offense at the level that they need him to be successful. Joe Mixon has a lot of pressure on him to make things happen. The defense has been regressing, although I love the pass rush. I think Derek Stingley's awesome. The linebackers are great. If they're healthy, their defense can definitely, get an upset, definitely can go toe-to-toe with any offense in the league. But I'm not a huge fan of this coaching staff. I am definitely not a fan of their offensive line. I just think they're too flawed and they've been too inconsistent, and I just don't see how they turn it on magically for the playoffs. This isn't the Chiefs. Okay. The number 3 seed is the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens are interesting because I think low-key analytics might suggest that the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. They're the number 1 team according to DVOA in football. They're the number 1 EPA offense in football. They might have the MVP. They might have the second best running back or best running back in the league. They might have a defense that since like week 10 has been top 3 in the league. So they're peaking at the right time. They have a proven Super Bowl coach, and they have a quarterback that's hungry for his first championship. But they have the hurdle of repeated failure in the playoffs, repeated disappointment in the playoffs as being a highly coveted favorite. And perhaps now that they're only the 3 seed, maybe that takes the pressure off the Ravens from really being that team that is the favorite. Maybe them as the dark horse, maybe them as the underdog, maybe them as the team that nobody expects truly to win because all the pressure is on the Chiefs and the Bills. Maybe this is the year for the Ravens, right? So my bold prediction for the Ravens is that if they can beat the Bills, I think they can win the Super Bowl. That's my bold prediction. I think that the Ravens or the Bills will represent the AFC in the conference. I don't think it's going to be Kansas City. I think Kansas City is eventually going to have their flaws shown, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I feel like the Ravens, they have the run game. If Derrick Henry can be their guy, he's their X factor. If he can, in cold weather, in the snow potentially in Buffalo, carry the ball 20 to 30 times, put the team on his back, put the offense on his back, Lamar just doesn't have to turn it over, and they play good defense, steady defense. Derrick Henry can be the type of guy that has a monstrous playoff performance that is historic levels of dominance, right? Like he is that type of player. And with their defense peaking at the right time, hopefully Zay Flowers is healthy at some point. They've got the tight ends to attack Kansas City, to attack the middle of the field against Buffalo. They've got a physical style of football that's always tough to play. And they've got a dynamic quarterback that in a Super Bowl, in a dome, against anybody is going to be tough to tackle and tough to challenge. So I think the Ravens are a legit contender. The number 2 seed in the AFC is the Buffalo Bills. They're obviously a contender with probably the best quarterback in the game right now, Josh Allen, and in my opinion, the MVP of the league. Now, the Bills are being doubted more than I would have thought. I don't see actually as many people picking the Bills as I would have thought coming into the playoffs. I think a lot of that has to do with their recent failures defensively against the Rams and the Lions. But their offense is as good as any offense in the league. They have so much depth at weaponry. They have more balance than ever offensively in the Josh Allen era with James Cook and their running game. And their defense is at least healthy, which it was not last year. They'll also play 2 home games if they do advance. I think they should beat the Broncos. The game that's questionable is the Ravens. And in my opinion, if the Bills do beat the Ravens, they should beat the Chiefs. They beat them in the regular season. They kind of dismantled them. And I do think that this Bills team is really well suited to beat Kansas City this year more than ever because they're more explosive offensively for maybe the first time ever. They're maybe more balanced on offense for the first time ever. Their defense, I think they're susceptible to a power running team. The Chiefs aren't a great running team, and they don't have a lot of explosion to throw the ball down the field, which kind of plays in the hands of the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are made. They are constructed to beat Kansas City. It's going to happen eventually, considering how many times they've beat them in the regular season. You think about the times they've lost to them in the postseason. 13 seconds. Missed field goal by Bass. I mean, how unlucky can you get? So to me, the Bills, I think if they beat the Ravens, they're going to win the Super Bowl, just as the flip side with Baltimore. The X factor is Milano and McDermott. 2 M names. Milano has returned to the lineup at linebacker. He hasn't looked himself lately, but he's an X factor because Against teams like the Ravens and the Chiefs, you're going to have to cover the middle of the field effectively. And Milano has always been known for his range at linebacker to cover. And McDermott, he's an X factor for simple reasons. Don't mess up the clock. Make the right call. Kick the ball in bounds, right? Don't use your timeout until you absolutely have to. McDermott, get your defense ready to play. McDermott, make the right clock decisions, and you very well, sir, could win the Super Bowl led by Josh Allen. And the number 1 seed obviously is the Chiefs. And everyone thinks they're going to three-peat. Everybody's picking it. Everybody thinks it's going to happen. I don't, personally. And maybe I'm just a Chief hater, which I will admit I kind of am. But I think they have many weaknesses, including a point differential that's not even above 60. Like, what is that? They have one legitimate loss, and they don't even have a point differential above 60, right? They don't have a top 9 offense or top 9 defense, according to EPA. Like, what type of Super Bowl team is that? So for them to be a Super Bowl team, I think that they need to break the trend of the regular season. I think they need to be more explosive offensively. And that's why I think their dark horse is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver, obviously their rookie, who's been coming on really well lately. Marquise Brown could also develop in this area as well. But Worthy has to be their Rashee Rice from last playoffs. The chain mover, against man coverage, their downfield option when they really need a shot, right? Mahomes is going to be good. Mahomes is going to limit turnovers and limit sacks and negative plays, but he needs playmakers out there to help him out. And with the offensive line being a bit iffy at times, the run game being a bit inconsistent at times, they need those receivers to step up. Kelsey and everybody else. Playoff Kelsey, can he rise to the occasion? I think Worthy has to be that explosive element that allows them to go toe-to-toe with the Bills or the Ravens in a potential shootout if that does take place. Because their defense, is just not as good as it was last year. It's good, but it's not a dominant, elite, all-time special unit that unit was in the playoffs last year that actually allowed them to win the Super Bowl. Many people kind of forget about that. So my bold prediction for the Chiefs is that they will kind of get exposed in terms of their weaknesses will finally be exposed. I think that they will lose in the AFC Championship most likely, but like I said, I think the Chargers have a chance to beat them in the divisional round as well. So my bold prediction is that the Chiefs don't make the Super Bowl. That's my bold prediction for Kansas City, if that is bold enough for you. But those are my takes on the AFC, the NFC, the NFL playoffs. My Super Bowl is the Eagles and the Bills. And my bold prediction is that Josh Allen will not only win the MVP, the regular season MVP, but the Super Bowl MVP, and the Buffalo Bills will finally win a Super Bowl. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Gronk spike the like button, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.